Alright, so if you like Persona, you've probably seen this meme before. I mean, it's most likely the thumbnail too. Now see, this meme has always interested me because who is this nigga? And who invited him? It turns out he's from an anime called Persona Trinity Soul, the anime that was a direct sequel to Persona 3. After learning that, I decided I had to watch it just to see if it was good or not, and to see why ATLUS has not acknowledged this nigga in like over 10 years. But before I started watching it, I wanted to see what most people thought about this anime. And from what I saw, most people either thought it was just straight bad or mediocre at best. After finding that out, I was even more interested in the show. Another thing about this show is that it's like legally no way to watch this. ATLUS really wants everybody to forget about this shit. Like the best footage I could find was in 360p. But after watching all 26 episodes, I want to talk about the anime because I have some thoughts about the show. Alright, so this is Shin. He's the nigga we don't know. And this is his brother, June, another nigga we don't know. They're on a plane back to their parents' house. They haven't been there since their parents died, which was like 10 or so years ago. Oh yeah, and this anime also takes place in 2020. After they get off the plane, they try and go back to their parents' house, but it's locked. So instead they go to this restaurant where you can hear changing seasons in the background. While they're walking back to their parents' house, this weird guy starts talking to Shin, and it turns out this is Igor. This is the first time I seen this nigga out the Velvet Room. This is also the first and last time we see Igor. Shin doesn't get his own Velvet Room. He just got this random ass table on the middle of the sidewalk. Igor definitely set this shit up like 6 minutes before he got here. But it turns out this is all just a dream, and he wakes up at the front door of his house, where we meet their third and oldest brother, Ryo. Ryo's a cop, and he hasn't seen his brothers in like 10 or so years. They all go in the house, but Shin decides to take a walk to the store real quick. But he decides to go everywhere but the store and goes to this random construction area. Inside, he finds this random theme on the ground, but this isn't just a regular theme, it's a theme with a persona. The persona tries to attack Shin, but he awakens to his own persona called Abel. After that happens, he tries to run away, but some girl with green hair keeps chasing him. This girl is actually a part of the main villain group called Morabito. Their whole thing is like stealing personas from people. They don't even really do shit until like the later half of the show, and it's like 8 of them niggas, but only 4 of them matter. But that girl eventually stops chasing him, and he goes back to his crib. And he also decides to go to school tomorrow like none of this shit happened. He somehow convinced himself that all that shit was a dream. But before they go to school, Ryo basically tells them they gotta move out even though they just moved in yesterday. And Ryo drives off before he can even explain why. The reason he's telling them to leave is because the cops are trying to take down Morabito, and he doesn't want them to get hurt. So he's being a dickhead to his brothers because he loves them. But Shin finally goes to school and he meets his friends, who are Takeru, Megami, and Kanaru. I'm gonna be honest, I don't even remember like most of these names. They really could be making shit up and I wouldn't really know. Okay, so I basically introduced y'all to a lot of the important characters and a lot of the important plot stuff. Oh yeah, besides like 2 things. Now see, June is actually 2 niggas. Okay, so they actually used to have a sister, June's twin sister. And 10 or so years ago, something really bad happened that killed their parents and almost killed June and his twin sister, Yuki. And this doctor said they can do a brain transplant to give half of Yuki's brain to June because Yuki was already cooked apparently. And because of that brain transplant, sometimes Yuki will like take over June's body and like use her persona and shit. It sounds stupid as shit, and that's because it kinda is, but who cares, I guess. And there's also this character called Iko. They're basically like a sister to all the brothers. And Ryo like had a crush on her too. Okay, so this anime is like 26 episodes, right? And the first 16 episodes are so damn boring. Especially the shit having to do with Ryo. Like it's so boring and somehow complicated too. Like the most interesting parts of the first 16 episodes are like the slice of life moments. Like in episode 7, the friend group goes on a road trip and Megumi brings her friend Yumi. She has PTSD because her persona almost got stolen, and it's also like permanently damaged. When somebody's persona gets stolen, they basically become a vegetable. But Megumi is really worried about Yumi because of all the stuff she's been through recently. And Megumi thinks she might, well, I can't say what she might do, so I'm gonna just put a clip up. Nigga move! She thinks she might do that. But Megumi and Yumi have this nice conversation where Yumi says she doesn't want to do that. She basically wants to do the opposite of that. Then they talk about how they used to be in the dance club together. But then the next day in the middle of the night, Yumi tries to do the thing that she said she didn't want to do because some weird little girl is controlling her. I'll talk about her later. Megumi awakens her persona to save her friend. She hugs her and June says her heart is dying. So she's basically a vegetable now. That episode is better than 90% of the first 16 episodes. episodes. Like the detective shit is so fucking boring. Sometimes they have moments with the characters that are actually interesting, but half the time it's just some bullshit. Like this is a very dialogue heavy anime and half the shit they talking about is so boring. This anime does have fights and shit sometimes, but they're not really good. Like the personas are see-through for some reason. Wait, actually there's one more interesting episode I just remembered. In this episode, Kaneru becomes a teen. There's this shit called the shadow extraction. They say it feels better than doing drugs. I don't even know how this shit works really. You just need one person with a persona to do it. But Kaneru's addiction to this comes out of nowhere. We've seen other people do the shadow extraction stuff and they didn't get addicted to it. To be honest, I barely can remember if Kaneru even did this shit. But like for this whole episode, she's an addict. Like the whole group goes over to her house. They sleep over there to make sure she doesn't do the shadow extraction with anybody. And she is so addicted to this shit that she rolls out of the bed to find someone to go do it with her. Then the next day she tries to do the shadow extraction again, but Shin slaps the shit out of her. Then because the withdrawal of the shit is so damn crazy, she awakens her persona. And you know the craziest part about this episode? It doesn't matter. Like her addiction doesn't get brought up again. Like we don't get to see her struggle with it or anything. Like this just happened and it's damn near never mentioned again. But you know, around this point the anime does start to get kinda interesting. It doesn't get really interesting until episode 16, but some of the stuff leading up to it is cool. So Ryo goes looking for Moribito, knowing that he's probably gonna die. But before that, he tells his brother some mysterious information and doesn't explain himself. He goes off to fight Keisuke. He's kinda like the leader of Moribito. They actually have a pretty alright fight. I mean, it would be better if the personas weren't like clear for some reason, but it's still cool. Ryo barely wins the fight against this old nigga, and he decides to take a little nap in the snow. But Eiko comes out of nowhere trying to help him, and his persona kills her because he can't control his persona without pills like Senjuro. Well, actually it's not that he can't control his persona without pills, it's that he can't use the shit. Because for some dumb reason adults can't use personas in the show. They have to take the pills to use the personas, and sometimes their personas will go out of control. But teenagers can use the personas perfectly fine, and they never explain why this is. Well, actually Megumi says she thinks the reason why adults can't use their personas is because they're not innocent anymore and they're not allowed to be. Like what the does that even mean? That is the dumbest shit I've ever heard. Even Akihiko thinks it's dumb. He says that's an interesting outlook. Like what the f is she talking about? Oh yeah, Akihiko's in this show too. My bad, I got ahead of myself. But anyway, Ryu is sad because he accidentally killed somebody who was basically family to him, and now he doesn't really do anything in the anime until like the last 3 episodes. Actually, he like shows up on a building mysteriously for like 1 episode. Later, Akihiko shows up to the brother's house to basically tell him that they think Ryo got clipped, and he's in their crib eating up their food and drinking their water. This nigga snuck in their house and made a nice little meal. Misuru ain't teach this nigga no manners. But Akihiko doesn't really do anything in the show. He just kind of exposition dumps. After this though, a lot more boring shit happens, I'm not gonna lie. But episode 17 was actually a really good episode. It deals with Megumi and her mom. Megumi's brother died in a car crash, and Megumi's mom says she wishes she died instead. Megumi doesn't talk to her for years, and in this episode they make up, and it's probably the second best episode in the whole show. The best episode is later and is about Moribito, but there's this character called Psyche. She's a part of Moribito. She's like doing undercover work inside of Shin school. She's important. Okay, so this weird girl is following Jin around. Her name is Ayane. She's extremely important. Like the whole reason the plot is happening important. Like 10 or so years ago, she got heavily experimented on. She was put up to be experimented on by her own dad, and the brother's parents also helped experimenting on her. But she escapes. She like jumps off a plane or some shit and somehow survives. She's a persona user, so I guess that's not like too crazy. Also in the show, persona users just like fly for some reason. I have no idea how they're able to do that. But anyway, after a couple years, she gets revenge on her brother's parents and causes that big accident that killed the brother's parents and their sister. And then she like dips for a couple years. To be honest, I'm not even really sure if she's alive or dead. This all gets explained in what is the best episode of the show, mostly because of Moribito. Now see, the leader of Moribito sees her as a goddess basically, and he has clones of her that he sacrifices the members of Moribito to basically wake those clones up. Now see, the members of Morabito never knew this. They thought they were stealing personas for a different reason. A good reason that wasn't just for some delusional old nigga. Like their whole life has amounted to doing this since they were kids. They thought that they mattered, they were something, but in actuality, their life didn't matter, they were sacrifices. They wasted all these years stealing personas, following somebody that didn't give a about them. It's crazy that a villain group that I didn't care about and I thought was boring became my favorite part of the show in one episode. Too bad they all die in the very next episode, just as they got interesting. Oh yeah, and that girl Kanaru is actually a robot. Kinda comes out of nowhere. Like this nigga just made a robot. Okay. She was working for him without even knowing. And she's like having a crisis because her whole life is a lie and all her memories are fake. She's sad, so Shin comforts her. And the show starts acting like these niggas were meant to be together for some reason. Like everybody in the show starts saying how they always had a crush on each other and that they were meant to be together and that they're in love. Like nigga, when did this happen? It never seemed like they were any more than friends. To be honest, I would have thought she was more in love with Psyche than him. But she dies because somebody forgot to change her batteries. She does get a really good death scene though. Like I honestly didn't give a shit about her character, but this is good. After that, Ryo returns and he has this plan to basically get rid of all personas. Akihiko doesn't like that because personas do a lot of good, but he doesn't care. He wants them gone. And Ayane helps him do it. The ending to the show is kind of complicated and confusing, but all you need to know is that Shin stops their plan. And Ryo, Jun, and Yuki help him in the end. And Ryo also dies in the end. And this bum ass nigga never gets a second persona awakening. But the show ends and Jun and Shin are happy. Okay, now that I've watched the whole anime and I'm very confused about what happened, do I agree with most people that said this anime was mid or bad? Yes, and this shit was very confusing and boring. I mean, it has its nice moments. It's definitely not the worst anime I've ever seen. It's definitely the most mid anime I've seen though. Like even if you're a Persona fan, I don't really think you would want to watch this. It's really just uninteresting. It has cool ideas like the whole stealing Persona thing, but I don't know, it's just still boring. Another thing I wanted to talk about is that when I was looking for opinions on the show, I kept finding people making the same goddamn joke. The check it out, I'm in the house like carpet shit. Like it was every damn thread niggas making the same joke. If you don't know, this is probably what Persona Trinity of Soul is most popular for. This one song. That check it out, I'm in the house like carpet part doesn't even play in the show. Like the joke was kind of funny the first time, but damn, it's like every comment. And I don't know if it's just my elite taste in music, but the song isn't even bad. It's actually kind of hard.